Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is the United States and Israel have announced a newly formed task force. The two nations will work together to ensure that the new sanctions the United States has imposed on Iran will be more than empty threats. They will be enforced. The first set of sanctions is already in place. The second set will snap into place on November 4th. The second set of sanctions will address the oil industry, the blood that courses through the veins of the Persian nation. The United States is hopeful that once imposed, these new sanctions will land a knockout punch to Iran's economy, compelling them to be more flexible on nuclear issues and less generous on funding worldwide terror. Since August, the sanctions that began against Iran has been suffering miserably, but still functioning economically. When the next set of sanctions hits them, Iran will have no significant revenue coming in. They will be cash poor with almost no foreign cash entering their country. Oil is their lifeblood. Every nation in the world has its own motivations and priorities. Each behaves in ways that best maximize and facilitate their own goals. The partnership between Israel and the United States is a natural outgrowth of the relationship between the two countries. They are allies in this fight because they clearly see what most other countries are blind to. The United States and Israel see eye to eye on the dangers Iran poses to the world. The rest of the world makes excuses for Iran's action. Iran is a significant threat to the very existence of Israel, and Jerusalem is acting to reduce that danger. The danger Iran poses to the United States is real, but not as imminent. That Washington is acting so forthrightly and speaking so candidly about Iran is refreshing and out of tune with previous administrations. Other administrations, and it doesn't matter which side of the aisle they hailed from, recognized the Iranian threat but wobbled when it came to actually standing up to Iranian leadership. Like many other Western countries, previous U.S. administrations spoke out about the dangers, but did very little to stop Iran's march towards nuclear capabilities. Israel stood alone in the battle by taking action, not merely using words, in the battle against Iran. But those days are over. Commenting on the agreement between the United States and Israel, a U.S. official said, and I'm quoting here, "Treasury's illicit finance team works closely with counterparts in Israel on efforts to counter the financing of terror, money laundering, and other illicit finance schemes and sanctionable conduct emanating from Iran." Israeli Minister of Finance, Moshe Halpern, who has met with the U.S. counterpart Secretary of Treasury Steve Mnuchin in order to further strategic economic ties between the countries, has said, and here's a quote again, "The economic sanctions led by the U.S. on Iran are proving themselves effective. They contribute to the removal of the threat to Israel's security and to the security of the entire free world. And this is why we should be thankful to the United States. The joint team that we have established will be of great importance in tightening sanctions on Iran." If there is one thing world leaders have learned from President Donald J. Trump, it's the power of the tweet. And they have learned how to send their message directly to their constituents and tell them what is happening without the filter of the media. Moshe Halpern learned this lesson well and tweeted, "We are working with true friends in Washington and together are looking after Israel's security interests." In longer form, Halpern said, "The economic sanctions that the United States is leading against Iran have proven themselves. They contribute to removing the threat to Israel's security and to the security of the entire free world, and for this we must thank the United States. The joint team that we have established will be of great importance in tightening the sanctions on Iran. This is great news for the state of Israel." This meeting was the fourth time Mnuchin and Halpern have met since taking office. They worked closely on sanctions before the task force was formed, but that was informal. Now the stakes have been raised and become more public. Now they have a mutual formal decision, a formal declaration. It's official. The United States and Israel are united against Iran. Wobbler nations, those who are afraid to act against Iran, will take exception to this U.S.-Israel action. Some will say that the action isolates the United States and Israel and damages any potential regional cooperation. Previous U.S. administrations would have probably said exactly that. Thankfully, things are different today. Hopefully, most probably, this decision will make the world a safer place for everyone, wobblers included. On a very different topic, in the spy trade, when a beautiful woman lured an unsuspecting male victim for the purposes of exploiting him, it was called a honeypot. The tool of the trade is still in existence and is still being used today. But in keeping with the times, the honeypot has received an upgrade. Traditionally, the honeypot was a beautiful young woman luring a regular older guy. She would step up to him at a bar, usually a hotel bar, and flatter him with an inordinate amount of attention. Her spy mission was accomplished as soon as they had pictures of either in the bar or in the room. The handlers could now exploit the target and get the intelligence or information needed. And then the honeypot would move on to her next job or Joe. It was an ironclad rule in the spy world. When a young, beautiful woman, especially a younger, beautiful woman, approaches you in a hotel bar, she's not interested in your mind or your body. She wants your information. Unfortunately, even with foreknowledge, many a target was seduced by a honeypot. In today's spy world, honeypots are both male and female, and hotel bars have become passé. The beautiful people are virtual photos of real people sent over the internet, and now they want not only your information, but also your phone and laptop, or at least the information encrypted on those devices. The one thing that hasn't changed with time is the success of the ploy. Flattery is still the best form of exploitation. Today, the terrorist organization Hamas is using Instagram as their honeypot. They're usurping, stealing, snarfing pictures of beautiful women and men and sending them to Israeli soldiers in highly secure units, especially intelligence and computer units. The men and women in the pictures and profiles are given Jewish and Israeli-sounding names so as to give Israeli soldiers the impression that beautiful kindred spirits are reaching out to them. Often the honeypot even asks the duped soldier to fill out an application form. Hamas is hoping that asking the soldiers to be their friends or share photos will work. One click, one download, and the hacker is in. Hamas has access to every picture, text message, email, and contact. They also have the ability to turn on phones, turn them into recorders, microphones, and even video transmitters, allowing for Hamas to see everything that's happening without the phone's owner suspecting that their cell phone is operating as a conduit. Hamas has lured lonely people, aka IDF soldiers, on active duty and preying on their vulnerabilities and desire for companionship since 2017. The ploy is not dissimilar to child porn ruses that trick children. It also resembles the notion of social engineering and spear phishing. Social engineering is creating a situation in which, during the course of normal cyber activity, a person is tricked into revealing details of their identity to the hacker. Spear phishing is a targeted cyber attack against an individual in order to attempt to get access or details from that person. Many of these moves require bait. In this case, the bait is the picture, the honeypot. This is the third attempt by Hamas to infiltrate the IDF through honeypots. In January 2017, when the honeypot program was discovered, Israel launched an educational response telling soldiers not to be drawn into any program by anyone they did not know. The program was called Operation The Enemy is Listening. The second attempt was in March of this year, when the honeypot hackers trolled Facebook and WhatsApp for photos. That attempt failed because Israel discovered the infiltration early and was able to educate their soldiers to repel the hackers. Interestingly, the women who were approached by men were quicker to realize what was happening and cut off communication much more quickly than did the men who were approached by women. Hamas's hackers are well skilled. They should not be taken lightly or dismissed as amateurs. One of the ways Israel was able to find out what the Hamas hackers were doing is by employing what's called a method which is called doubling. Israeli soldiers who realized that they were hacked turned their phones over to the tech team. They followed along and turned the tables by hacking the hackers. The countermeasure by Israel was entitled Operation Heartbreaker. It involved 11 IDF soldiers, 8 of whom were approached and infiltrated via Facebook, and another 3 via WhatsApp. Building on the assumption that all's fair in love and war, Israel too is engaged in the use of honeypots. In Israel, however, military and defense sanctions for the operation were not sufficient. Israel needed rabbinic sanction, and in 2010, Rabbi Ari Shavat issued a legal rabbinic decision that was published by the Tzomah Institute, ruling that Israel's Mossad could indeed use real honeypots. The Tzomah Institute is engaged in understanding Jewish law as it intersects with the modern world. According to the ruling, even religiously orthodox young women could be recruited as honeypots for the sake of national security. Social media has become almost everyone's modus operandi for communication. We need to know that we are all ripe for being ripped off. The cyber world is populated by white hats and black hats. White hats are on our team, black hats are on the other team. What unites all of them is that they are all exploiting social media. Coming up next, Points of View. Here's what some important voices have been talking about. First up is an editorial from the New York Times. Remember, the editorial board represents the opinions of the board, its editor, and the publisher. It is separate from the newsroom and the op-ed section. This editorial is entitled, New York's Yeshiva Students Deserve Better, subtitled, Elected Officials Should Require Orthodox Jewish Schools to Meet Legal Standards. It was published on August 23rd, 2018, online, and August 27th, 4 days later, in print. The editorial takes ultra-religious yeshivot, or Jewish schools, to task for not preparing their students, and places the blame directly on the shoulders of the mayor's office. This is how the editorial begins. In 2015, concerned parents, teachers, former students filed a complaint in New York City's Department of Education, charging that 39 ultra-Orthodox Jewish schools in the city failed to give children a basic education, violating state law that requires instruction to be substantially equivalent to that in public schools. 3 years later, virtually nothing has been done to hold the schools to legal standards, as politicians have ducked their responsibility rather than challenge leaders of one of the city's most powerful voting blocs. In a city with low turnout in primary elections, candidates often covet the support of Orthodox communities, which tend to vote based on the guidance of religious leaders. The editors continue in their editorial. Students at these yeshivas receive little secular instruction in primary school, and some former students have said boys in particular receive even less after age 13. Administrators at the schools that investigators visited said the yeshivas have adopted a broader curriculum, but they provided the city with only an outline of the material. The editorial concludes, the failure of politicians to challenge Orthodox leaders denies some of the most vulnerable members of Orthodox communities' governments full protection. Officials have an obligation to ensure that every child in New York receives a sound education. I've got to tell you, this is a shanda. It is an embarrassment for the city of New York and for the Jewish community. All students, all children must be taught basic skills in school. These skills will enable them to be productive contributors to society. Without teaching these skills, all but a few exceptions are condemned to a life of poverty and dependency on welfare. Second up is a column from the New York Post, and it's by Benny Avni. And it's entitled, Trump Brings Reality to Middle East, and was published in print on August 28, 2018. Online, the column was entitled, Trump is Busting the Myths That Prevent Middle East Peace, and it was published the day before on August 27. Avni writes about how US President Donald Trump is changing the basic ideas of how the Middle East functions. Avni begins, slowly but surely, President Trump is slaying the sacred cows of Palestinian-Israeli diplomacy. Last week, the State Department announced a $200 million cut in annual aid to the Palestinian Authority. Before that, America cut support to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, a body created in 1949 to tend to some 750,000 Arab refugees from the war Israel's neighbors launched to erase it off the map. Avni continues, since Jimmy Carter's days, and more so since the Clinton-era Oslo Accords, Washington saw refugees as a core issue to be resolved between the parties, with America as referee. It's never been resolved. So just as in recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital, Trump is changing tact. And as expected, veteran peace processors are screaming bloody murder. Avni is an Israeli who has been living in New York City for decades. He's a clear and succinct writer. He really excels when addressing topics like this. I have no doubt that Avni is correct in his reading of Trump and the situation of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. Coming up, commentary through cartoons where pictures tell the story. All three cartoons today come from powerlineblog.com and were published in their weekly collection posted on August 25th, 2018. They are humorous and an important relief from the heavy and depressing collection of cartoons dominating the news cycle over the past few weeks. This first cartoon makes fun of the movement to destroy statues of Confederate heroes. This statue is of Yoda, the iconic Star Wars character who represents light and goodness, and who taught Luke Skywalker, who later became the leader of the rebels. The pun is that rebels is a synonym for the Confederacy. The caption reads, "Oh great, another statue of a rebel general." Next up is a cartoon entitled Woodstock Reunion. It simply makes fun of aging and those who still love the culture of Woodstock and their youth. The banner reads, "Woodstock Reunion," and there are elderly people with walkers and canes, false teeth, and milk of magnesia, some sleeping in sleeping bags, while one elderly man says, "Rock on," and holds up two fingers as a peace sign. The last cartoon for today is a Pictoon. Two bears are in the forest, and they're standing in front of a family van. The van has stickers on the back window showing the mother, the father, and the children. One bear says to the other, "Look, a menu." In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. It looks like tensions are rising between Saudi Arabia and Germany. This conflict emerges in the aftermath of a Saudi-Canadian conflict. Saudi Arabia's conflict with Canada has been simmering for a while, but the most recent issue of contention came about because Canada spoke out about Saudi Arabian social injustice, especially against women and minorities in Saudi Arabia. The Saudis told Canada to butt out. Germany spoke up about the conflict, and they too sided with Canada. On the economic front, as a result of all of this, of Germany siding against them, the Saudi Arabians have moved to block European pharmaceuticals from entering Saudi Arabia. The massive loss of sales will impact not only Germany, but all of Europe and even the United States. Moscow's Chabad Rabbi Beryl Lazar secretly visited Iran as part of a Russian Duma delegation in April, immediately after Passover this year. The trip was covered in the Times of Israel and in the Hebrew press. Neither Chabad nor the rabbi has confirmed the story. Iran originally rejected the rabbi and said that they would not permit him entry at all. But Rabbi Lazar is not just a Chabad rabbi from Moscow. He is Vladimir Putin's rabbi. The Russians insisted that Rabbi Lazar be part of the delegation, and so he was. While in Iran, Rabbi Lazar visited the Jewish school and the synagogue and spoke with the Jewish community. Now, there are rumors that there was an attempt to resolve tensions between Iran and Israel using Putin and Russia, as well as Rabbi Lazar. But there was no chance of that being true. It was most likely another example of Putin's need to prove his power over Iran. Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif was in Syria. He arrived on the heels of Iran's defense minister Khatami. Zarif met with Syrian President Assad in order to review international diplomatic responses to their assault on Idlib, one of the last strongholds of the Syrian rebels fighting Assad. The Syrian leader said the fact that the West has resorted to threats and pressure on Tehran and Damascus attests to its failure to implement the plans it proposed. He continued, the pressures exerted by some Western countries will not deter both countries from continuing to maintain their principles and securing the region. Iran and Syria are in this for the long term. Palestinian leadership is lashing out at the United States, not surprisingly, specifically at President Donald J. Trump and those of his attachés who were given the mandate to bring peace to the Israelis and the Palestinians. Chief Palestinian Advisor Nabil Abu Rudena, who is also the spokesperson for the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, said this about U.S. envoy to the Middle East, Jason Greenblatt's comments regarding the PA's handling of the Gaza issue. I'm quoting, "The U.S. government is interfering in internal Palestinian affairs, and we will not allow this," unquote. He actually said, and I'm quoting here again, "Greenblatt is part of a scheme to transform the Palestinian issue from one of a nation yearning for independence into a mere humanitarian issue. The nation won't accept this," unquote. This is ridiculous. This is a total exaggeration, and Rodena is completely wrong. Jason Greenblatt is U.S. President Donald J. Trump's special envoy to the Middle East. He was quoted in JTA saying that the Palestinian issue is not central to the Middle East, and that resolving the Palestinian issue will not solve any other problems or impact any other issues. Of course, he added that this does not mean that the Palestinian issue should not be solved. Greenblatt said, and I'm quoting, "Solving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict will not solve other conflicts in the region, including the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, terrorists in the Sinai Desert in Egypt, a tragic continuing civil war in Syria, war in Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon, instability in Libya, and an Iranian regime that oppresses its own people and foments terrorism around the world. That does not make resolving this conflict any less important," unquote. Yes, Greenblatt is correct. What a welcome breath of fresh air. It's good to hear this point of view and know that it's reflective of U.S. policy. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. We have spoken a little bit about spies and honeypots. The word spy in English has a very negative connotation. We imagine that the spy is deceitful and a backstabber, cloak and dagger people who lead secret lives, who lie, cheat, and murder for their cause. Yet in the Bible, spies are thought of very highly. Their job is essential and highly respected. They are scouts. The word spy actually means to see in English, but it has lost that meaning. In biblical Hebrew, there are several words for spy: miragel, or the plural miraglim, and sopheh, and the plural tsofim. The miragel is someone who walks, and the sopheh is someone who sees. In the Bible, the 12 spies who went into Canaan walked and scouted and came back and reported. It is the walking that is so important, and that task lends itself to the title miragel, or spy. The message is that 10 spies returned with a report that concluded that the Promised Land could not be conquered. Only 2 spies gave a report of the fortifications, the people, and the land, and said, of course Canaan can be conquered by Israel. The message is simple. Spying is an essential task. Spies must make certain that the report is accurate and that they pursue their destiny. The 2 spies were correct. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double high or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, P.O. Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.